What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Legitical Response. We cover political news. We keep you up to date and keep you informed with everything that the government does. Now, I'll talk about the shadow campaign of the 2020 election, to save the 2020 election, if you will, from Time Magazine. I've read that article, and it's outright insane. And you still hear, to this day, people talking about fraud voting and fraud ballots and signature verifications and Dominion voting machines, and all of that is, you know, sure, there may be some truth to some of those claims, but, you know, we couldn't find enough evidence to overturn the election, right? We couldn't find enough evidence of fraud. It just wasn't there. So, yeah, Biden's in the White House. He's been there. He's destroyed the country. So we're going to have to deal with that fact. But I always talk about this because it's very, very important. This shadow campaign that Democrats, and I've postulated before, like, you know, what's the shadow campaign for 2024? Well, a lot of people really don't know what that is, what the shadow campaign is. So I figured I would make a video talking about it. I saw this story and I'm like, oh, that's a perfect jumping point. So let's go ahead and get into it, because you're going to need to buckle up. And I will say right off that you guys out there watching this video, if y'all could do me a big favor, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Tell people about what's going on with Democrats and tell people to get involved. Like I said, share this video because we need to know what the Democrats are doing, what games they are playing, so we can know how to play those exact same games. Because, yeah, it's cheating. Essentially, a legal way of cheating. But let's get into it. Because, yeah, this is crazy, y'all. Check this out. After blaming his 2020 loss on mail balloting, Trump tries to make GOP voters believe it's okay now. Yeah, it is okay now, and I would suggest everybody, if you can, vote by mail. Right? You got a lot of Republicans that are always like, no, you do it on election day and all this, you know, paper ballots and all this stuff. Sure, if we could get all the states to agree to that, that would be great. Make it a national holiday, for God's sakes. That would be a very secure election. It's hard to get around paper ballots, voter IDs, and all this other stuff, right? But the left, with their language, they love to use, oh, it's voter suppression. You're trying to suppress the black vote. Well, how is that? Because voter ID is racist. Some black people don't have the ability to get an ID. It's like, no, we've debunked that outright. And if you go and ask any black people, they'll say that's demeaning and ignorant, as a matter of fact. But let's get into it. Martha Moehring voted the way she prefers in Nebraska's Republican primary Tuesday, in person, at her West Omaha polling place. She didn't even consider taking advantage of the state's no-excuse mail-in ballot process. In fact, she would prefer to do away with mail-in voting altogether. She's convinced fraudulent mail ballots cost former President Donald Trump a second term in 2020. And she's only half correct. It wasn't fraudulent mailed ballots. It was regular mailed ballots. But we'll get into that. I don't trust it in general, Moehring 62 said. I don't think they're counted correctly. Well, you know, we can't ever be sure of that. And sure, I can almost guarantee you there were some fraudulent mailed-in ballots. I'm sure there was. But was there enough? We didn't catch all of them, blah, 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 blah. We could argue that until the cows come home. However, we can't get around the fact that, yeah, Joe Biden got 81 freaking million votes, which is an insane number. Donald Trump got more votes than any other incumbent president in American history, and he still lost to Joe Biden by a lot, right, as far as the popular voting goes. And there is a good reason for that. Like I said, we'll get into it. This is a very important video. But now Republican officials, even sometimes Trump, are encouraging voters such as Moehring to cast their ballots by mail. The GOP has launched an effort to, in the words of one official, correct the narrative on mail voting and get those who were turned off to it by Trump to reconsider for this year's election. The push is a striking change for a party that amplified dark rumors about mail ballots to explain away Trump's 2020 loss, but it also seemed as a necessary course correction for an election this year that is likely to be decided by razor-thin margins in a handful of swing states. Yes, their push is a striking change because Time magazine came out and told us the game. They told us what they did. They told us exactly how they cheated to win the 2020 election, or as they called it, to save the 2020 election. Let's get into that. Here we go, y'all. There was in their words, this is from Time magazine. You can go look it up. By the way, I would suggest reading the whole thing. It's insane. Time magazine, in their words, not mine. There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protest and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-noticed joint statement of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and ALF-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as sort of an implicit bargain, inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive racial justice protests. You like the sometimes destructive? You mean completely insane? $2 billion worth of damage? You know, sometimes destructive? Oh, it's mostly peaceful protests with a federal courthouse burning in the background. Yeah, these people are nuts, y'all. In which the forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy. The handshake between business and labor was just one component of a vast cross-partisan campaign to protect the election, an extraordinary shadow effort dedicated not to winning the vote, but to ensuring it would be free and fair, credible and uncorrupted. This is where they get the free and fair, the most secure election ever. Yeah, these people were working behind the scenes, in their own words, a conspiracy, a shadow campaign, if you will, to gather as many pieces of paper as they possibly could. It's outright nuts, y'all. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and an autocratically inclined president. What do they mean by that, autocratically inclined? The best president in my lifetime. That's what they meant. Though much of this activity took place on the left, they're even telling you this was mostly left-wing activity. Most of it. It was separate from the Biden campaign and crossed ideological lines with crucial contributions by nonpartisan and conservative actors. Yeah, the anti-Trump people. The scenario the shadow campaigners were desperate to stop was not a Trump victory. That didn't make any sense. It was an election so calamitous that no result could be discerned at all, a failure of the central act of democratic self-governance that has been a hallmark of America since its founding. Their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws and helped secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. Yeah, so they actually got out there and campaigned. That's where we saw stuff like Texas versus Pennsylvania when Texas sued Pennsylvania because they changed their election laws without the approval of their state legislature. Right before the damn election, just so they could get all this stuff done. You know, like a couple of months before the election, they changed their election laws without state legislature approval. How can they do that? That's why Texas sued them. And the Supreme Court didn't want to touch it at all. Didn't want to touch it, and I don't know why. That blows my mind. I know I say that on every single freaking video, and I'm sorry, but my mind is constantly blown by the acts of the Democrats and the left as far as to subvert democracy while at the same time yelling and screaming we must save democracy. So, what does that tell me? That tells me that they're not talking about democracy as defined by Webster. No, that's not the democracy they're talking about. They're talking about some sort of authoritarian overturning of democracy that they call democracy. In other words, their democratic power of their Democrat Party to rule this nation with a freaking iron fist, right? We see it all the time. If you don't celebrate Pride Month, for God's sakes, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe, and you deserve to be excised from civilization altogether. You know, that's what they do. That's what they are. They're constantly calling people a racist. It just pisses me off to no end because, you know, most Republicans, most conservatives, I should say, because, like I say, I'm not really a Republican, but I am a conservative, which there is a big difference, by the way. But most Republicans, conservatives, we just want to be left alone. You know, we want to go to church on Sunday. We want to do our thing. We don't want your freaking pride flag flying above the White House. We don't want to look up there and see this, right? If you want to do your thing at your own house, you want to be gay, you want to do all that, fine, do that. Be that way. That's no skin off of my back, if you will. But do not come putting that crap in my face and try to force me to participate in your degeneracy when that's how I see it. That's what my beliefs are. Yeah, I believe it is a grave sin to be gay. You're not supposed to sleep with another man, as to a woman is not supposed to sleep with another woman. If you want to do that, I'm totally fine with that. Do it in your own house. I am not going to participate in that. And as far as the trans stuff, yeah, you want to do that. Once again, go right ahead. I'm very tolerant on that. But if I accidentally misgender you, you know, I'm sorry. But if you don't look the part, then, you know, there's nothing I can do about that. That's not my fault that you look like a dude, but you want to be called a woman. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I got way off topic on that, but I can't stand the authoritarian left. They just piss me off. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits, right? Like having voter IDs and cameras around these mail-in drop boxes. Yeah, voter suppression. Yeah, come on. It's not voter suppression. It's common sense voter security, as a matter of fact. Recruited armies of poll workers and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against disinformation and use data-driven strategies to fight viral smears, right? Like talking about Facebook that actually promoted or sent out notifications to Democratic voters to go vote, basically. And they didn't do that to Republican voters, as a matter of fact. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, cheating. They executed national public awareness campaigns that helped Americans understand how the vote count would unfold over days or weeks, preventing Trump's conspiracy theories and false claims of victory from getting more traction. After Election Day, they monitored every pressure point to ensure that Trump could not overturn the result. Yeah, so they are responsible for the 30-something court cases just getting turned down upon standing. In other words, the judges didn't want to look at evidence. They said, no, we're throwing this out. Good luck. When Trump brought actual legitimate cases of voter fraud, they just said, no, we're not going to look at these. Like the Texas versus Pennsylvania case. The untold story of the election is the thousands of people of both parties who accomplished the triumphant of American democracy at its very foundation. Yeah, you want to call that democracy? Cheating to one side? Trying to get all these Democratic voters to go vote instead of Republican voters to go vote? Yeah, you call that democracy? Yeah. I don't believe you for a second, Time Magazine. Says Norm Eisen, a prominent lawyer and former Obama administration official who recruited Republicans and Democrats to the board of the Voter Protection Program. For Trump and his allies were running their own campaign to spoil the election, right? They're talking about saving democracy here. The president spent months insisting that mail ballots were a Democratic plot and the election would be rigged. They're outright telling you that mail voting is what they did to push Democrat voters to vote, to get more votes than they normally would. In other words, going around having activists go around getting people to fill out their mail-in ballots to get them to vote. Oops, we didn't go to any Republican houses today. We just went to Democrat houses. We'll try to do that tomorrow. Yeah, this is the game they're playing. This is the shadow campaign. His henchmen at the state level sought to block their use, while his lawyers brought dozens of spurious suits to make it more difficult to vote, an intensification of the GOP's legacy of suppressive tactics. Yeah, right. The GOP, get this is what they're trying to make you believe, that Republicans don't want voters to vote. Does that make any logical sense? No, it doesn't. But when they say stuff like that, it makes normal people that might not be thinking about this logically, that might not read the news every single day and look at all the freaking crap they're doing, look at that and be like, holy crap. Yeah, they're trying to suppress votes for some reason. Not thinking that would be to the detriment of the Republican Party to try to suppress voters. What kind of sense does that make? It makes none. At all. So they're lying. Yeah, they're trying to suppress voter fraud, by the way, by having these drop boxes all over the place and just anybody and everybody, like we see in the flood of criminal aliens coming across the border, which, by the way, if you want to talk about that, that's going to be my next video, talking about some crap on the border. But anyway, all these people coming along, right, getting criminal aliens to vote in local elections, right? We know for a fact, off of videos that I've covered, all these criminal aliens, once they get counted on the census, that gives whatever area those criminal aliens came to and are living in, that gives those areas more electoral power. More power, more congressional power, because now they got to redistrict the maps, giving the Democrats, because these are Democrat cities where these criminal aliens go because they're sanctuary states, so it gives the Democrats more power. Right, we covered that the last time on one of my previous videos. Before the election, Trump plotted to block a legitimate vote count. And he spent the months following November 3rd trying to steal the election he'd lost, with lawsuits and conspiracy theories, pressure on state and local officials, and finally summoning his army of supporters to the January 6th rally that ended in deadly violence at the Capitol. Yeah, you know what? The only person that died on January 6th was one of those quote-unquote rioters. But you love how they say that. He's trying to overturn an election through the court system. These people are outright insane. He's bringing legitimate cases of voter fraud to courts for them to litigate. And they're trying to call this, he tried to overturn the election. Yeah, it is the president's job, by the way, if he sees that there's voter fraud, or if he believes that there's voter fraud in an election on a very mass scale, which is what he thought, is it not his job to order the DOJ to look into this, and for his lawyers and them to bring lawsuits to try to fight some of this fraud that he believes there was in the election? Come on, guys. This is just nuts on behalf of this very partisan Time magazine article. That is how we litigate our differences. That's how we work things out in this country. That's why there's 3 branches of government. We have a lawmaking branch, a branch to execute those laws, and a branch to litigate differences that we may have. It's beautiful. And that's how this system is supposed to work. But the Democrats and the left will tell you that, oh, if you bring a case of fraud in an election, oh yeah, that you're trying to overturn the election. Of course that's what he's doing. He saw that there was fraud, or what he believed to be fraud. So he tried to rectify that the legal way. Just blows my mind. These people are nuts. This is the inside story of the conspiracy to save the 2020 election based on access to the group's inner workings, never before seen documents, and interviews with dozens of those involved from across the political spectrum. It is the story of an unprecedented, creative, and determined campaign whose success also reveals how close the nation came to disaster. Do you guys hear this? How close they came to disaster. Having a free and fair election, have everybody vote how we always have since this country has started. Having the vote normally would be a disaster. That's what they're trying to tell you. Not having Democrat activists go around and get as many pieces of paper from Democrats as they can, as many votes for Joe Biden as they can, is what saved democracy. Does that sound very democratic to you? Sure, it's legal. Not no more for the most part. Once they saw what happened, states started changing their laws around all this stuff, and the GOP wised up to it. That's why, like with the previous article, what we started this video with, Trump is telling you, yes, it's okay to vote by mail. If you're not going to get out there and go and stand in a line on election day, vote by mail. That's so we can get as many pieces of paper as we can to save this country from a reckless administration that is Joe Biden's administration that is absolutely destroying this country, y'all. Every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of an election was defeated, says Ian Basin, co-founder of the Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan rule of law advocacy group. But it's massively important for the country to understand that it didn't happen accidentally. That's right. It didn't happen accidentally. They conspired behind the scenes to get as many Democrats as they could to vote by mail in that election. The system didn't work magically. Democracy is not self-executing. Right. No, it's pushed by the Democrats toward the Democrats. Do you really think we're going to get a bunch of Democrat activists to get Republicans to vote? No. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to get as many Democrat activists to go and get Democratic voters to vote. Yeah, that's what they're going to do. That's not democracy, y'all. That is called cheating, and that's why I always say the Democrats cheated in 2020. Sure, it was legal, but by God, it'd be like Mike Tyson boxing Macaulay Culkin, right? And Mike Tyson being the Democrats and Macaulay Culkin being the Republicans. That's how much of an offset this was, having all those activists getting Democrats to vote by mail, right? People that normally wouldn't vote by mail. That's why we saw the numbers that we saw in 2020. 81 million votes, for God's sakes. Just look at the previous election. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw a pie chart up here so you can see that it was like, I'm not sure right off, but you'll see it there. I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head, but it was like 62 million and 65 million people voted, right? Go to jump to 2020 and automatically it's 75 million people voted for Donald Trump, or 76 million people voted for Trump, and 81 million people voted for Joe Biden. You mean to tell me that we just had that much more involvement? No. There was something funny going on. Yeah, those numbers from 2016 were comparable to previous years, by the way. 60-something million people voting in each election. Yeah, so what we saw was just outright insane numbers because of the shadow campaign put on by the Democrats. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream, a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change the rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election. You just told me that you were rigging the freaking election. They were fortifying it, and they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure the democracy in America endures. Yeah, freaking right. A powerful cabal of people influencing social media. You got the corporate press doing what they can do because we all know that they're left-wing activists and they lie through their freaking teeth. Yeah. You mean to tell me that that was a free and fair election? Give me a freaking break. Now, hopefully, if you're still with me on this, every time you hear them screaming out, "We've got to save democracy," you know exactly what they mean. They're not talking about democracy. Like I said, the Webster's definition of democracy. They're talking about the shadow campaign. They're talking about them being in power, them ruling with an iron fist over the people of America, right? That's not democracy. That's authoritarianism, by the way. The Institute's work helped 37 states and D.C. bolster mail voting, but it wouldn't be worth much if people didn't take advantage. Part of the challenge was logistical. Each state has different rules for when and how ballots should be requested and returned. The Voter Participation Center, which in a normal year would have supported local groups deploying canvassers door to door to get out the vote, instead conducted focus groups in April and May to find out what would get people to vote by mail. In August and September, it sent ballot applicants to 15 million people in key states, 4.6 million of whom returned them. In mailings and digital ads, the group urged people not to wait for Election Day. All the work we have done for 17 years was built for this moment of bringing democracy to people's doorsteps, said Tom Lopak, the center's CEO. In the end, nearly half of the electorate cast ballots by mail in 2020, practically a revolution in how people vote. About a quarter voted early in person. Only a quarter of voters cast their ballots the traditional way, in person, on Election Day. That's outright insanity, if you ask me. So, from now on, when you hear me talking about the shadow campaign and the Democrats and them talking about democracy, you know exactly what that means. You know exactly what to look for, and you know exactly that they don't mean the Webster's definition of democracy. They mean something totally different. They mean some Mao or Stalinist type of rule, a communistic rule with an iron fist over the people to give them the perception of freedom. But you don't have freedom, folks. They're going to put who they want in office. Just look at what they're doing with Joe Biden, right? This dude is not there at all. I've played tons of videos. Might as well go ahead and throw this clip in there.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to What must be what? I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure. Let me start off with two words. Made in America. We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. Are you ready to choose freedom over democracy? Because that's America.
And they're actually running with this person, and they actually have people believing that another 4 years of this last 4 years continuing is going to be a good thing. Yeah, freaking right. There ain't no way. There ain't no way these people don't believe Joe Biden is not a puppet. For God's sakes, the man can't barely talk. He walks around, can't come off a stage right. Looks like a Roomba. I know we've said that 1,000 times. Looks like a freaking Roomba. Shaking hands with ghosts, mumbling through his words, reading pause off of the teleprompter in his speech. Just absolutely makes no sense as to why they're running this guy. He should be, chilling out in Wilmington in his backyard barbecuing or doing something, or watching MSNBC or relaxing in his elderly years. But no, they've got this guy on the freaking campaign trail. They've got this guy in the most stressful position in America, and they think that that's good for this dude, right? That we all see his decline. We think that's good to put an elderly man through that type of stress. Yeah, right. Give me a freaking break. Get off of here. Get out of here. Anybody that votes for Joe Biden is insane. Like I've said before, these people don't know what they're doing. Or these people do know what they're doing. They're trying to get power for themselves, take it away from Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a threat to their power, because he's going to come in and clean freaking house. Hopefully. I'm hoping that's what Donald Trump does. I'm putting a lot of faith in the fact that what Joe Biden has done to Donald Trump will come back to bite the Democrats in the ass. I really hope it does. I really hope to see those people go to jail. I really hope to see that their democracy burns to the freaking ground, because that's not democracy, folks. That's authoritarianism, like I said, and we need to stand up and fight. We need to push back against this authoritarian rule. A dictator's not going to show up and say he's a dictator, for God's sakes. A dictator's going to come in and deceive everybody. I think you guys get the point. That's all I got. But like I said in the beginning of this video, share this video with anybody and everybody you can. Show your friends, show your co-workers, show everybody this freaking video, and let them know what the Democrats did in 2020. If they have those conspiracies about voter fraud, tell them, yeah, you might be right, but this is what actually happened. It's verifiable. The people that actually did it are telling us what they did, and they're saying it's bipartisan. We had Republicans too. Yeah, right. Yeah, freaking right. You mean to tell me, once again, like I said earlier, you mean to tell me you're going to get a bunch of Democrat activists to go out and get Republicans to vote by mail? Yeah, freaking right. No. You can sell that lie to somebody else. I'm not buying it. You shouldn't buy it either. And let these people know that we have to fight for our country if we want to save it. And I'll end the video with this little speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, populism is not a threat to democracy, but I'll tell you what is. It's elites ordering social media to censor political opponents. It's police shutting down dissenters, be it anti-monarchists in this country or gender-critical voices here, or last week in Brussels, the National Conservative movement. I'll tell you what is a threat to democracy. It's Brussels, DC, Westminster, the mainstream media, big tech, big pharma, corporate collusion, and the Davos cronies. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off ordinary people as deplorable. The threat to democracy comes from those who smear working people as racist. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off working people as populists. And I'll say one last thing. This populist age can be brought to an end at the snap of a finger. All that needs to be done is for elites to start listening to, respecting, and, God forbid, working for ordinary people. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Y'all try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.